Hello everybody, my name is Mr. Bright and we're going to be working on linear equations again. We're going to be doing point slope to standard. I just want to remind you my room is in room 225. It's down at the end of the hallway. If you ever have any questions or if you don't understand something and want to get some additional instruction, you're always welcome to come by. I'm generally around in the mornings. Mr. Bashir is next door to me. He is also available in the mornings and is available to help. So if you ever have anything you need to ask about, please feel free to come by. So before we get started today, there are a couple formulas that I want to write down again. They were at the top of the sheet that you did yesterday, but we need to write them down again, and you need to memorize these formulas. You're going to need them for the test, and you're not going to have them, so they have to be memorized. Okay? So the first formula is point slope, and it is this one: y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. All right, and from yesterday, we had that reminder that m is slope. x1 and y1 are just the point that we're going to use, and we'll see this. We're going to use this in just a moment. But let's go ahead and write down the others as well. There is slope intercept. This is the one that I think most of you are most familiar with, y equal mx plus b. And then finally standard form. And so this is the sheet we did yesterday. All of our answers were in standard form. We were going from slope intercept to standard form. Okay, and standard form is ax plus by is equal to c. And I'm going to write down here just two little rules for this. The a must be positive, and the second rule is no fractions. I know it seems like a lot, but it is important that you know these three formulas, right? We're going to review tomorrow, and then we're going to take a test on Friday. So it's important that you know them. I think it's very helpful when you're working on these problems. If you rewrite the formula before you use it, it will really help you memorize the formula. And so let's try that out. Okay, so let's get started. Let's just start off by reading these directions. Right, the point slope form of the equation of the line through the given point with the given slope. So we're given a point and we are given a slope, and we're supposed to write the point slope form. So let's just practice this and write that point slope down again. It is the y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. That's what our problem is going to look like once we're done with it. Now, when we do point slope, what's going to happen is we're going to plug something in for x1, and we're going to plug something in for y1, and we're going to plug something in for m. But this x right here is going to stay an x. It will be a letter, the letter x. This y is going to stay a y. We're going to change the m, the x1, and the y1. And so look at this, and you maybe have already figured out where this is going. This is my x1, this is my y1, and my slope, of course, is my m. And so I'm going to write this. Instead of y minus y1, maybe I'll just write that down real quick. Y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. Okay, so instead of y minus y1, I write y minus 4, because that's my y1, is equal to, and in place of m, I write 1, and instead of x minus x1, I write x minus 3. All right, and that's it. That's my answer. I'm done. All right, right there, that is finished. That is the point slope form through this point with that slope. Now, yesterday I said you don't have to write a 1 if it's there, right? If you think about it, if you distributed this 1 times x is x and 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. So it's not uncommon to see this written like this. Y minus 4 is equal to x minus 3. All right, where that 1 just isn't shown there because it's a 1. Anything else, if there's any number other than a 1, we would have to just leave it right here in front. But sometimes you'll see it written like this. Either of these answers is perfectly fine. All right, so if the substitute would please pause the video for just a moment, and if you all would do problem number 2, please. Okay, so your initial line should look like this. Y minus 5 is equal to negative 1/5 times the quantity x minus negative 5. And this is an answer that we would say is mathematically correct, but we never write it like this because we never write negative signs. Minus, minus, we don't ever do that, right? We know that if we have two negative signs like that in between the x and the 5, that this becomes a plus sign. So this really is how you should write your final answer. Y minus 5 is equal to negative 1/5 times x plus 5. Okay? All right, so let's move on. Okay, so let's take a look at question number 5. Our directions are to write the standard form of the equation of each line. Okay, so standard form, that is the ax plus by is equal to c. This is what we were doing before, right? This is what we did yesterday. We had to get into this form. Remember, a cannot be negative, and none of these numbers, a, b, or c, can be fractions. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward what we're going to do. All right, this is currently, what form is this, I guess would be a good question. If you haven't noticed yet, we are given point slope. All right, that's the form that they gave us, which is what we were just doing up at 1 through 4. So all I have to do, there's two different things that I need to do in this particular question. I need to distribute this thing. Now, does it make sense if I say this is actually a negative 1 that's out in front? Okay, and I've got to distribute that negative 1 into the x, and I also have to distribute it into the negative 3. So we're going to do that first. That means the y minus 2 is going to stay the same. And when I distribute this, negative 1 times x is negative x. And then negative 1 times negative 3. Well, a negative times a negative is a positive 3. All right. So now we're in a situation that's a lot like where we were yesterday. It is a little bit different. I need the x and I need the y to be on the same side, and they're not. They're on opposite sides of the equal sign. Okay? And then I need anything that doesn't have an x or a y, but anything that's just a number to be on the right-hand side. So that means I need to move this negative 2 over to this side. So how do I move that? To add 2 to both sides. All right. So I'll still have my y on the left, but this negative 2 plus 2 becomes a 0, just goes away. And my equal sign. The negative x is not going to change. But I have the 3 plus 2, right? 3 plus 2, and that is a plus 5. Okay, now hopefully this looks familiar because we're actually in slope-intercept form now, right? This is one of the forms that we've been working with. This is the y equal mx plus b. So we're back in familiar territory. This is what we were doing yesterday. And so at this point, I just have to move that negative x over to this side. And the way we do that is we're going to add it to both sides. Plus x. Plus x. And again, what we did yesterday was we wanted the x to be first because that's what our form says has to happen. And so instead of writing y plus x, I'm going to write x plus y is equal to positive 5. And there you go. That is your answer in standard form. All right, so what I want you guys to do now is, if the substitute would please pause the video, and I want you guys to try number 6. Remember, the first step is to distribute the 8. So distribute the 8 into both of those. All right. So let's maybe do that first. Very first step is to just distribute the 8. So pause the video while everybody can do that, please. Okay, so if we distributed the 8 properly, we'd have 8 times x, which is 8x, and then 8 times 1, which is 8. All right, now, the next two things we're going to do while we pause the video, you need to subtract 5 from both sides to move the 5 over to here, and you need to subtract 8x from both sides to move the 8x over here. So do that now, please. Okay, so if we did that properly, we would have subtracted 5 from both sides. That 8 minus 5 becomes a 3. And then we subtract 8x from both sides, and so we get this negative 8x plus y is equal to 3. And we still have a problem because this 8 cannot be negative, and it is. So if you remember from yesterday, what is it that we did? We multiplied everything by negative 1. So do that, please, and get your final answer. Pause the video for just a moment. Okay, so hopefully that worked out well. Negative 1 times negative 8x is a positive 8x. Negative 1 times positive y is a negative y. And negative 1 times a positive 3 is a negative 3. So 8x minus y equals negative 3. That is your final answer. All right, so now I want you guys to do problem number 7 all on your own. Do the entire thing, start to finish, and then come back to the video and let's see if you did it correctly. All right, so how'd you do? Final answer should be 6x minus y is equal to 3. All right, you distribute the 6, that gives you 6x minus 6. You add 3 to both sides to move the negative 3. That gives you a y is equal to 6x minus 3. Subtract 6x from both sides. You get a negative 6x plus y is equal to negative 3. But that negative 6 can't be negative, so we multiply everything by negative 1, and all of our signs change. That negative sign becomes a positive, that positive becomes a negative, and that negative becomes a positive, and that's our final answer. All right, I'm going to leave you guys to do number 8 as far as classwork. We're going to jump down to problem number 9. So the reason that I brought that up is because of what we're going to do here. You're looking at problem number 9 and you maybe noticed there is this big old ugly fraction here, right? And we know that we're going to standard form, so we are not allowed to have fractions. All right, now I want you to write these directions to yourself so you remember them when you're working on this later on. Step number 1 is we are going to multiply by the denominator. Okay? And so in this case, what that means is I'm going to multiply by 3. So on the left side, I've got to distribute the 3. I'm going to do 3 times y and 3 times 2. That gives me 3y, and then 3 times 2 is 6, so a plus 6. All right, is everybody okay with that? 3 times y is 3y. 3 times 2 is 6, so 3y plus 6. Now I'm going to rewrite this right side first. I've got 3 times negative 5/3 x minus 3. All right, now the right side, what happens is instead of having to distribute, since this number is going to be distributed, I can just multiply these two numbers together first, the 3 and the negative 5/3. And so this is exactly what we were just doing a second ago. I look at that, that's a 3 over 1, the negative 5 over 3. These 3's cancel, and this right side just becomes negative 5 times x minus 3. The left side stays the same. All right, so by multiplying by the denominator, by multiplying by that 3 right there, it gets rid of my fraction and I'm left with this negative 5. And now I'm just right back to where we were in that last problem. Right? We are right back to where we were when we had some number that we had to distribute and get all the way down to standard form. That's where we are. All right? So, go ahead and finish this problem out. Pause the video for just a moment. Let's check and make sure everybody gets that answer correct. And then we'll move forward. Okay, so if everything went well, then you ended up with a final answer of 5x plus 3y is equal to 9. All right, I did something a little trickery here. I did everything at once. I subtracted 6 from both sides, and I also added 5x to both sides at the same time. It's fine to do, but definitely don't have to. This 3y and the 5x, I wrote with the 5x first, and then the 15 minus 6 is 9. So if you got that, great job. And so now let's take a look at problem number 10. And I want you guys to do problem number 10 on your own. Remember, the first thing you have to do is multiply by the denominator. So we're going to multiply both sides by 5. All right, so let's pause the video for a moment. Let everybody distribute the 5. And let's come back and make sure that that step went okay. All right, so distributing that 5. On the left-hand side, you have 5 times y is 5y. 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. On the right side, this is the tricky part. Remember, those 5s are going to cancel, right? That 5 in my numerator and the 5 in the denominator, they cancel. This becomes a 4 over 1, but we just write 4 over 1 as a 4 times x minus 5. Now I've got to finish this problem. I've got to distribute the 4 and get the thing into standard form. But if you can do this part, this is the hardest part. All right, once you've done this, after that, I think you're good to go. All right, so I want you to finish this page, do all the problems, and then please turn it in at the end of the period. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, so before we do number 9, I want to do something I really probably should have done yesterday, and that's I want to review what happens when you multiply just a regular number times a fraction. Okay? So typically the way we teach this is we say you write the 3 as a fraction. So 3 over 1 times negative 5/3. Okay? And now that I've got a fraction written, I don't need a common denominator or anything like that. The multiplying fractions is not too bad. Adding is when you need a common denominator, but we're not adding, we're multiplying. So I've got a positive number times a negative number, so I know that's going to be negative. I multiply across the top, so 3 times 5 is 15. And I multiply across the bottom, 1 times 3 is 3. And I put another equal sign there because hopefully you see that 15 over 3, that can be simplified. 15 divided by 3 is 5. And so my final answer is negative 5. Now, what I talked about yesterday is that when we do a problem like this, so let's go back to the 3 times negative 5/3. All right? So we put this 3 over 1. And now, if you see it, if this number in the numerator in the top is the same as this number in the denominator in the bottom, then I know that they are just going to cancel, because what is 3 over 3? It's just equal to 1, right? That's why this happened over here. That's why we got down to a negative 5 here, is because these 3's canceled. We just didn't do it first, we did it second. And that's fine, and you can do it second. But if you see it here, it just saves you trouble and tends to, help you make fewer mistakes. And so we still get negative 5 as our answer, because we're left with, when things cancel, they become a 1. So this is a 1 times negative 5, which is negative 5. A 1 times 1, which is 1. And so we get this negative 5 over 1, but of course we always just write that as negative 5. Okay?